Hello, welcome to part 3 of Understanding React. What was actually wrong with classes? Well, last episode was about the reserved word this and how it breaks when a method gets passed around detached from its instance. That's one problem with classes. And in this video we are going to look at two more, and none of them have to do with this. So we are going to look at two methods on these classes, React with classes, or how it started with classes. We are going to look at component did mount and component will on mount. And these roughly resemble the modern use effect hook, right? The use effect that takes, it's a use effect, it's a method or a function in the new React ways, and this one takes in, well, you guessed it right, a callback and it will take a list of things it watches for, that when they change it runs this use effect, right? Well, the component did mount more or less runs the same time use effect would run, and component will on mount will clean up more or less like use effect cleans up. Anyways, in the class way, component did mount is a method React calls once after the component first appears on the screen, and that's called when it's mounted. And then component will unmount, React calls this one before it's removed. So these are part of a list of methods the old React had, and it checks if they exist in the class and then runs them at certain times. All right, that's enough about that. Let's keep going. Let me first bring back my browser. Right, let's keep going. So let me delete these headers, and this is a very basic skeleton with an HTML page with this script tags that bring the development version of React without having to install it. All right, so let's do a class React component using still classes. All right, let's start. Let's do a counter again that also that does two things: the counter, but also a window tracker, window width tracker. All right, so here's our component, and then we need the constructor. And then this dot state is equal to, it's a class, it's an object, sorry, with key value pairs, and then count is the key and the value 0, and width we are gonna set it equal, and then window dot inner width, a property of the window object. All right, simple enough. Okay, now with the React methods, the built-in methods, component this, and I think the name of these are Lifecycle methods. I don't know. Again, these are methods React runs, searches for them in the class, see if they exist, and each one of them gets run at certain events. Window add event listener. So when the component does get mounted, React will run component did mount. And when it runs, what's going to do? It's going to add an event listener to the window, and the key and the event listeners take two things: a callback and the thing we care about. In this case, is a resize. This dot handle so this is a callback function I have not created yet, but I will. So then we pass it in here. Now let's do the counterpart. Component will mount, and this is like its pair because we need to clean up after. Window dot remove event listener resize this dot handle resize. Now we gotta be careful how we declare these functions, because if not, these will break. This is one of the problems with classes, that this is confusing. All right, so now we declare them with an arrow function, so it freezes the this handle resize, and we have to declare them like arrow. Well, we saw last video the options we have so this does not break, and one of them is this arrow function. Wait, this set state, and then set state is another built-in function or method that changes the state attribute or the state property, replaces that object with an object. So we are replacing the with window dot inner width. So if the screen resizes, it triggers this function. And what does this function do? It will run set state, which defines again with changes this property state with this one we are passing in here. And this one has two things, and we are only passing one of the key value pairs. So React is smart enough, it knows how to do it. It will only change this one and keep the count like it was. So then let's do the handle no, handle resize. It's the same for both. All right. So remember, this is a counter that also tracks the window width. So this is the state, and here we have the count and the width, and this will handle the width side of things. So now we need an increment for our button. We will have a button that increments the count, no? The typical increment is equal to set state, and then count is going to be this dot state dot count plus 1. So now with this function increment, we are running set state function of this object and changing the count to what it was before plus 1. Simple enough. Now, another of the pre-made functions that React has, like the component in mount and component will on mount, it's a render. And this one returns HTML. Right? And let's do and this is the JSX thing that Babel does. That's why here the text Babel and here the Babel. Babel takes this return that is HTML and turns it into real JavaScript. Right. More on that on a future video. Paragraph count, and then we escape HTML with curly brackets and put this dot state, so we can mix HTML with JavaScript. These curly brackets escape the HTML that this render function expects in the return. It expects HTML and everything inside one single tag. And if we need HTML, JavaScript inside this, we put it inside curly brackets, like in the regular React you already love. And if you don't worry, we're getting there. We will get to the regular React. And then we need a button, and the button says add one, and key value pair on the tag, it's on. We need to assign it an on click. Increment, and pass the function needs to run when we click on the button. Like this. We have to send our counter component to the div id root. And for that, we need a last line over here. React DOM dot create root, and then document dot get element by id root, and then to this render. And what are we gonna render? Well, our counter component. Something went wrong. That was the error, syntax error. The global provided by React DOM is React DOM. Control S. There we go. Our counter with a width. So we can add, and then if we change the width, it changes. Beautiful. All good, no? So now let's assume that we need to add something to our component, like analytics, and it's pinging every 5 seconds something about it. So let's add it. So in component, when it mounts, we're gonna fake it with this dot timer set interval, and this guy's a callback and the time every, let's say, 5 seconds. And what is it gonna do every 5 seconds? It's gonna console.log analytics ping, and then this dot state dot count, maybe. Right? And now we have to do the cleaning. In component will mount, now we have to clear interval. And okay, I'm not gonna mind a lot how this timer works and how this clear interval and this dot timer. The thing is that analytics ping, then we add a couple, and then on our next analytics, there it is. Now it has 3 counts. Now it's gonna have 5, so on. All good. So now we have 2 things to worry about on our component, because it's doing an analytics and does the width thing and does the count thing. So now we are starting to see again the things, the little things, like now we have 2 features inside the did mount that have nothing to do with each other, that are unrelated, except for when they get run, when the component which is this part of code. When this gets mounted, we will run unrelated stuff, right? And the resize feature of our component is in 3 places: the handle resize, and then on the component will mount, and then on the component will unmount. So let's say then we want a third feature, like a WebSocket or a subscription or a whatever. And then component did mount becomes a list of unrelated setup lines, and component will unbound becomes a list of unrelated teardown lines. And every feature is smeared across both. So that's the first problem. Lifecycle methods, this one and this one, group code by when it runs, not by what it belongs to. And then, second problem. Now let's say we want that window with tracking somewhere else and in a different component that has nothing to do with the counters. So let's do that. Let's add another component. Let's add a let's add class user or a user profile extends react dot component. All right, so now let's copy everything in this one. But we don't need the count, just the width. And then component did mount only the handle resize, yes. And then we don't need to clear an interval. And then we handle resize. We don't need the increment because we have no button on this one. And on our render, we are just gonna return not even a div, just a paragraph. That's gonna say profile, some profile, and then window width, and then escape to JavaScript. This dot state dot width. Right. All right, for now, for this to work, we need to add it to the render of the. So here, this render, we are gonna render a div, and inside this div, we are gonna render our counter. Sorry, we are gonna render our counter inside this div, and we are gonna render our, how do we name it? User profile. There we go. Here's our profile. And where's our ping? Here we go. So add one counts. And now the profile window also has this width functionality. But now here's the second problem. We had to do this whole copy pasting of the same things. Component did mount, component will mount, just like a few videos ago with where we did the counter A, counter B, or count 2, render 2. Yeah. So back then we fixed it by putting the shared methods on a class. So every instance shares one copy. But that will not work here because this isn't a method we can share, because it's a fragment of component did mount, only this part plus a part of this one plus a handler. Both of these methods also contain other unrelated code. So how did this got solved when we had these classes thing? So they wrapped the component in another component. So let's look an example of how we or they on the old days solved these things, the wrapping. So let's go with a wrapping example. So let's start with the wrapper function. Function with window width. And then we are going to pass this function a component. We're going to name it wrapped component. And then we are going to do some stuff with it. So we are going to return a React component that takes in this component and do something to it and return it. So return class extends react.component react component, and then our constructor props, and then let's not forget our super props, and then this dot state. So this is gonna be this same stuff. So let me just yes, because it's the copy pasting stuff, the things we share between these two, the resize stuff. So we bring with the this dot state and the window width, and the component did mount handles the event listener for the resizing and runs it handle resize on the mounting, on the on mounting, and the handle resize changes the state with the window width. So we are missing a render because a render is special for these wrappers. Render function, and what is a render function gonna return? So instead of returning some JavaScript, well, some HTML, sorry, it will return some HTML, but our wrapped component, the wrapped component was sent in here, and now we are gonna return it back. But we need to send it away with a prop. Width equals this dot state dot width, and we're gonna, and if it was brought in here with some props, we need to send them back. So we also need to add this syntax dot dot dot. So this function doesn't eat anything that was sent with the wrapper, with the component that we need to wrap and then send back. So we need to send it back with a new thing. In this case, it's a width. So no, because when I am missing a curly bracket, because like this. Yes. Well, this is works because we have not used the window width. The function with window width that takes in a component and spits out the same component but with a prop. Simple enough. I don't know. All right, so now let's wrap our counter and our profile with the wrapper so we don't need to duplicate all this code, no? So now the class user profile doesn't need anything. Or we need the render part. Everything like this. Now the user profile will return this, but instead of window width, instead of this dot state dot width, now we need this dot props dot width. All right. And on our counter does need the constructor, but we do not need the width anymore because this gets passed to us. We don't need the mounting and the unmounting here. That's done in our wrapper. We don't need the handle resizing here. That's done in our wrapper. The increment is this dot state. This is okay. And then here again, this dot state dot width, it's a dot props dot width. I think that's it. But now we need to wrap them. So let's wrap them. Const profile with width is equal to our width with window width function, and then we are going to pass the user profile, and then we const counter with width, and then this is gonna be equal to with window width. It's gonna be equal to the return value of running the with window width, passing the counter. Cool. All right, so now we need to render counter with width and profile profile with width, and counter with width. Cross our fingers, it works. 1, 2. Now our pinging. We remove the pinging. Here in our component did mount, we did remove the pinging. Okay, but anyways, now our width functionality is in both our count component and on our profile component. And they both. And the instrument was this wrapping in a function. So user profile now is one line. Counter has its counter state, and then component, no component did mount, no component didn't mount, no handle the resize things. All those go to the wrapper. So all the resize logic exists only here in the wrapper, or exists in one place, and two unrelated components use it. And this pattern is called higher order component. And this was the standard answer for these things for years because it works. But it has a thing or a cost, right? So now on our counter component, we have these props width. And we have no idea, well, if this were a big application with 20 components, and in one of my components, I'm looking at my counter component, right? And I'm looking at this dot props dot width, and I have no idea where it came from. So I need to now look 20 places to see where this came from. And then again, we are not even rendering this render. We are rendering the counter width. This is a very small educational purpose one, but if it gets messy, so is that the thing that now we use these dot state, no, these dot props here. We use these props here, and we don't know where we calculated this. Where's the wrapper? We don't know what's wrapping this. Well, by looking just at this component, if it were separate files or so. So that's the little cost about this. And this is just with one wrap, and this is just with one wrapper. How about if we had something like fancy stuff, and then this was with some thing fancy, and then with more fanciness, and then even more so with the fanciness, and then inside here the user profile. Lots of stuff wrapping around the user profile so we can include things we repeat in components, right? So, summary. To wrap it up, 3 problems total from these 3 episodes. We saw that this breaks when a method leaves its instance. We saw that lifecycle methods group unrelated code together. And sharing stateful behavior means wrapping components in components in components. So anyways, next episode, we're gonna have a brief look at what the render is doing, because this JSX stuff. So what is it actually doing? We have been seeing this returning JSX. Where is it? This return and then HTML. So we're gonna take a brief look at that. So anyways, hope this was not more confusing, too confusing, not too much rambling. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. See you on the next one.